trust me?
We're going to go ahead and get into the first part of my stream today, and that is my review for The Last of Us Episode 6, chat. And I'm actually glad I watched this because I was hearing a lot of mixed things about this most recent episode, saying like, oh, not enough is happening. You know, it was this episode just busied itself with character development and character bonding, and the characters actually being honest with one another. I'm just like, those are all good things. That's what I want to see in this series. That's what this series has handled so well. And so I was so kind of surprised to hear, you know, from some of the reaction people were saying like, oh, it's boring. Listen, is there a lot of action this episode? No, no, not at all. I mean, it really doesn't come until the very end in which we see action, but so much of this episode was just about the characters finally being honest with themselves, about the things that are driving them, their own personal demons, what they're scared of, and I really liked it. I mean, just to start off, you know, honestly, chat, like, this takes place 3 months after the events of episode 5, chat, which dealt with Henry and Sam, which, you know, for me, I thought that was a terrific episode. It was probably my second favorite behind episode 3. The actors who played Henry and Sam did such a fantastic job, Chad. Just, yeah, what episode. And they had all the character drama and all the action you could want. This particular episode takes place 3 months later, and now we're in the dead of winter. So they're already kind of changing the aesthetic up from the game here. There is the winter section of the game, which is probably my favorite section, but they're kind of changing the, you know, the seasons for certain places in the game. So, which I didn't mind though, because man, that's, you know, we don't have to think about it, but could you imagine how difficult it would be to live in the apocalypse during the winter? I mean, like, oh my God, you would just die of exposure, Chad. And this episode just captures how miserable and cold that experience would be. And it opens up with, and I forgot that this actor was going to be in the series, even though he was featured pretty heavily in the trailer, and that was Graham Greene, who plays this character named Marlon, who is this Native American who left the reservation a long time ago, way before, you know, the fungi apocalypse, chat, and they just been living out in the countryside, surviving for the last 20 plus years by themselves. Like, oh, it's always great to see this guy. You know, he showed up. You've seen, listen, you might not know the actor's name, but you have seen him for decades and decades, chat. You know, I guess one of his biggest roles is in Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner, chat. He plays the Native American chieftain in that, the kind of the main leader. And I guess Kevin Costner's, I would suppose, father-in-law in a way. And he's been in a ton of other stuff, chat. I also believe, I think he also has a role in Die Hard with a Vengeance, possibly. But he shows up in everything, chat, so he's always great. And I love how this part of the episode just plays out because, you know, Joel and Ellie are there pretty much kind of taking over their cabin because they need to know where they are, but they also need to assess the situation and whether, you know, Graham Greene and his wife Florence are a threat. And it kind of plays out like a comedy, like a very dry comedy. And I realized the whole time, like, the way in which Graham Greene was talking to his wife and how she was talking back to him, it kind of mirrored, in a weird way, the relationship that Joel and Ellie have, because, you know, he's very no nonsense. He really doesn't want to deal with outsiders, anything like that. And whereas, you know, Florence, she's more, you know, sarcastic, a little friendlier. You know, she's not afraid to bite back at Marlon. I was like, this is funny. I was like, oh my God. It was a wonderful little interaction between the four of these characters and how Ellie was talking to him and how Marlon and Florence were reacting to her. I thought that was great. And, you know, and the thing is, I think it's needed, especially after episode 5, because so much of episode 5, that ending, it ends so tragically. And I thought it was smart on the filmmakers' part to, hey, let's start this episode, despite it, 3 months later, and it's the dead of fucking winter in the fungi apocalypse, which sounds like a nightmare. Let's go ahead and start with a comedic scenario. And it worked for me, like, really, really well. I love that. But after that, most of this episode, it's really is focused on Joel and Ellie bonding, and then also bonding with other characters. In this episode, which, shows in the trailer chat, so this isn't a spoiler, but Joel finally reunites with Tommy, played by Gabriel Luna, which we haven't seen since the first episode, chat, when they're doing the stuff that takes place in 2003. And so it's been a very long time since we've seen Tommy, although we have heard about what Joel and Tommy were doing in between that time, chat, surviving and also murdering innocent people. And that is touched on throughout this entire episode. And the conversations between Joel and Tommy, like Pedro Pascal and Gabriel Luna, have excellent chemistry. You completely buy them as brothers. But we also see that, Tommy has, he has grown up, that he is very much his own man. He doesn't want to do everything that Joel wants to do. And, Joel's always been so steadfast and stubborn and things, and he doesn't like that. And there's revelations about Tommy's relationship with his wife, Maria, who I'm going to talk about in just a bit. But one of my favorite moments of this episode is one in which Joel is truly, I think, honest with someone for the first time in a long time. More than Ellie, more than, Tess. And we see his character, like, emotionally break down. And I thought that was fantastic. I love that, where we saw such a vulnerable side to Joel. And I know, listen, my criticism I've kind of had of the series so far is, like, they seem to be hiding just how brutal and cruel Joel can be. And I imagine they're doing all this right now, so it's going to kind of take us off guard for those of us who've, played the game and see what he's capable of. But I like that, we really see him in such a weakened emotional state, and the person he really wants to open up to, he feels most comfortable with, is with his brother. And Gabriel Luna, like, really holds down that scene along with Pedro Pascal. They do such a terrific job here. And then we're introduced to, now I'm not familiar with this actress, I don't know if I've seen her or anything, chat, Rutina Wesley, who plays Maria. They make some changes to her character here. She has a lot of interactions with Bella Ramsey's Ellie. And, they're kind of in a weird place, because initially how Joel and Ellie are introduced to Maria and Tommy's commune, as we're communists here. And he's like, we are? He's like, yeah, it's a commune. He's like, oh, which is a very funny little comedic bit. I like the back and forth between the two of them, and they learn more about each other. And they really expand on Marie in this episode, because, in the games, it's like, again, I haven't played the first one in a long time. It's been a while since I've streamed it, and Last was Part 2. I know Maria is in it, but not a significant role. Here they really delve into her backstory, and they talk about, like, what her profession was, what her family was like, some other things about her family that I really liked. And it's like, oh shit, it really humanizes his character. And then it also, you realize, like, oh, why she and Tommy are so protective of their little community. That's the other thing too, Chad. Like I said in my episode 3 review, I love survival stories in general, because, they're thrilling, and we become invested because we want to see how the character is going to survive whatever scenario they're in, right? What resources they use. How do they use those resources and materials to craft their home, their weapons, traps, etc. I love shit like that. It's just always interesting for me to watch. And like, ooh, I see how you're going to do it. And it always makes me imagine, like, oh, this is how I would do it too, right? And we kind of see how their community of, I guess, like, of several hundred people, operate, and just look at all the details of everything. I thought that was really cool. And it's kind of like this turn of the century, like, lifestyle they all live. It's like they have electricity, but, they don't have vehicles. They're on horses. They have, like, a blacksmith. They have people that work leather and stuff like that. Very much like we see in the first Last of Us game, but especially in Last of Us Part 2, where we see that town, like, how they adapt that, I think, is very, very good. And it's like, oh shit, they carved out this wonderful little piece of land in which they're very careful to protect, and they're like, hey, we don't want any goddamn mountains. So you understand like why they are the way they are, why they're so protective of it and so wary of outsiders. But I like how they've kind of figured everything out, and we see like normal civilization, despite certain things being absent, right? But like we see people like watching a movie of like Richard Dreyfuss, or I think what they were watching. It looked like a Close Encounters of the Third Kind or something. I was like, oh shit, look at that. So little things like that, and like people actually being happy and being productive in their life after like so much misery. Again, this episode feels necessary after how dark episode 5 was, but at the same time, there's plenty of character drama and people being very honest with each other and growing as people, and the relationships are deepening through their bonding. It's not till the last 15-10 minutes of the episode where we get some action, where it sets up a huge thing that happens in the games in which Ellie has to really rely on the skills in which she's been taught by Joel and others, and I imagine it's going to be a big flashback. But I personally thought this episode was very good. It really again, Pedro Pascal did a great job. Gabriel Luna was great, but Bella Ramsey, she gets the one moment which you all might know from the game, in which she's in the girl's bedroom and her and Pedro Pascal are going back and forth. I thought she handled that material very well. I thought that was great. And she's really, back in the day when I reviewed episode 1, though not her fault, I thought like, yeah, they're not really giving her a lot to do. It's gonna be a situation where they're gonna give a lot of the heavy dramatic stuff just to Pedro Pascal, and Bella Ramsey's just gonna be reacting to him. It's like, no, she gets a lot to do in this episode, and she holds her own with several actors who have, they're showing off their skills. And she shows off her skills here, and I thought she was great. She's very much earned that role, Chad, and her abilities are on full display. So I know a lot of people are saying that this was a filler episode, that it was boring, etc. I don't think it was filler. This was necessary. This is very important for Joel, very important for Ellie and their relationship and reuniting with people and getting some semblance of normalcy. For them, especially after episode 5. So I vehemently disagree with people saying that this was unnecessary. This was very, very necessary, and how it ends, it sets up something that's going to be even more interesting, even more dynamic, and I assume tragic. But yeah, Chet, I've had a few criticisms of The Last of Us so far. A few qualms, but this episode I thought was one of the best ones. I mean, to me, it's probably my third favorite, honestly. I think episode 3 is still my favorite, followed by 5 for the reasons I talked about, obviously, today and last week. But here, this was my third favorite. I thought they did a lot of great character work here, chap. But that's just how I feel. I'm curious to hear you guys. How do you feel about Last of Us episode 6? About the guest stars, some returning faces, chat. How did you feel about them changing certain aspects of the game in this sequence? Because we spent a lot more time with these people here than we did in the game. Tommy and his wife Marie and things, right? So I'm curious about that. And what do you think of the season overall, chat? I'm very curious. Let me know.